It's a whole different world. The amount of testing that has to go in so that you don't have a surprise and lose a moment you're never going to get back. You have that moment of inspiration. I mean, the worst thing is when you want to do something and you're looking at that bar going across that technology. In the past was slowing you down. Now it's ready when you are. We want these investments to last and keep going. We don't do planned obsolescence. So that's the only other area. We fight a little with Apple.
There's one of you out there. That's great.
Hey everyone, I'm Rafi Salem here with another edition of Talking MEWShop with Manhattanetic Workshop. Josh Apter, thank you for being with us. Jason Banky, as usual. And today, Larry O'Connor, we welcome you to the party. Thank you for joining us. So Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about Manhattanetic Workshop? Jason, follow up, and then please introduce Larry.
Okay, well, we've been doing this for over 20 years, which I guess I just evidenced by me showing the old SCSI drives that we used to work with. But it's, back when we first started, we had a 4-week art of editing class. It turned into a 6-week. We were like having students output their reels to VHS and then mini DV because Final Cut was happening and everybody was using Firewire and it's like maybe you would master on beta. You'd never go digi beta, but that was a thing. You're just reminding me of all these sort of evolutions in the last 20 years and how incredibly fast it's all evolved and how much faster and cheaper everything's gotten. And the school has adapted. Now everyone gets a website and they upload their reels to Vimeo or some other platform. And, no one touches anything. The desks are all clear instead of like big CRT monitors and 5 decks and stuff like that. It's like, it's an iMac, a keyboard, mouse, and you're good to go. So we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, we do, Avid and Adobe and DaVinci and all kinds of DSLR production classes, things like that. But, I was an editor before and during the beginning of the company. So I'm sort of geeking out on this right now. And I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Jason.
Yeah, I've worked with Josh for too many years, and OWC came in our map because we were always using you guys to keep our Macs and our computers and our everything relevant, because we used to be able to do that, and we used to use your products to keep our stuff relevant back when we had the cheese graters and everything. Like we were able to do that kind of stuff, but you've developed all kinds of stuff, and we wanted to talk to you because the technology is such a piece of all the stuff that we do with post and production, and we thought who better to talk to than someone like yourself who's done that through. I guess you started when you were like 14 years old. Is that true?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, 1988. Seems like yesterday.
Did you and Michael Dell like play nicely in the sandbox?
No, we were not, didn't even know how to say a totally different sandbox. I was out in the middle of nowhere in the technically Marengo, Illinois. So northwestern Illinois, farm country for all practical purposes. But
So give
had an
give us a
Apple,
little.
wanted to build upgrade it, and wanted some options that were better than at that time, were being offered available. And learn, a lot was learned by doing. I mean, there was a real need out there. There's real opportunity because Apple has, I mean, historically, and even, I guess you could say if you want to say their darkest days, but throughout history, I mean, Apple has built really good hardware. They've built equipment that lasts, equipment that has had a lot of flexibility. I guess you get into the present, you can imagine today, there's not really an internal upgrade path. I do believe they still build absolutely some of the best hardware on the planet and stuff that's going to run longer than just about any other piece of computer technology you can buy. But it is disappointing we can't do what we used to be able to do internally. But with Firewire, with Thunderbolt, it's pretty incredible what we can connect with the cable. I mean, Thunderbolt essentially gives us PCI capabilities externally without having the slots inside. So there's still a pretty good path, and it really is insane, what you can connect with a copper cable today. Versus, you go back actually 16, 17 years ago, Thunderbolt started out as Lightpeak, which was going to be all, effectively fiber optics. and light transmission. And it was actually really neat, that when Thunderbolt was coming along and going through that evolution, because the first demonstrated light peak solution actually was it wasn't one of our drives entirely, but they modified one of our enclosures to actually demonstrate light peak. So we thought that was kind of cool. And of course, now we're very much invested in a big supporter of the Thunderbolt ecosystem with more products there than probably anybody else on the planet today.
Yeah.
If
So
you can upgrade it internally, you can definitely do it externally.
yeah, but we liked internal. I like to be able to open the back. It's just funny. We were talking about those old quadras. Like you could just, you lay it on its side, pull the back off, reseat your cards because that was usually what was going wrong. And we come from an age when there was some of that requirement on you, right? I mean, I guess you could drag it to TechServe or something, and and have it looked at by a professional because this was pre-Apple stores, like, but you were sort of encouraged to to roll your sleeves up and and trick out your computers and right, like what were
Sure,
those
yeah,
cards?
once we got into the 90s, that started to happen. Of course, in the 80s, Apple basically, tried to tell everybody, no, can't do anything. Had to even get a special tool to crack, those
Mhm.
original Macs. But yeah, certainly as we got into the 90s, I used the word fun. It was fun to be able to open these things up, swap processors, obviously had memory. You had level two
Mhm.
cache that, could transform a machine into, how to say, a powerhouse from, it was nuts, what you could do and the impact of what you could do. And of course, that was in a day when we were all limited to spinning drives. I mean, it was less
Mhm.
the processor and more the drives, I think, that were the bigger hit because you still had well, yeah, bottlenecks mainly on the I/O side. The processor could be, pounding away at full speed, and you still were faster than a drive. And that stayed true pretty much up until, and again, faster processor always made a difference. More memory made a difference because that allowed things to stay more with the processor as opposed to always being moved off to the drive. And then we got the solid state drives, and that changed everything. Now we finally had an I/O, a storage system that could keep up with the processor. So it was you look in from 2010 forward. I mean, once you added an SSD, it was pretty incremental the benefits you got from each processor generation. And now today with the M series, Apple touts, it's really interesting. The marketing is exceptional. I mean, if you look at the M4 and the hype around the M4 is an amazing, super fast processor, arguably one of the best processor series in the world. But when you compare it to an M3 or an M2 or an M1, and it's not as big a difference, certainly between M3 and M4, and even M2 and M4, depending upon which processors you're comparing, as you might think. And then, of course, Apple Intelligence is advertised everywhere. Any Apple M series can do Apple Intelligence. And probably more important, if you're a photographer going from an M1 to an M4, it's a pretty, the difference that you experience in processing images is kind of hard to detect. You can measure it with benchmarks and such, but these machines are so fast, and it's video, different story, admittedly, but just going from an Intel machine into a current M series, I mean, it's night and day. I mean, it's kind of, if you go back in the day, going from dial-up to DSL and then DSL to cable, and of course, what we have today with broadband. I mean, it's how do you go back? And it's
Mhm.
these systems, again, I just would argue, are definitely built to last. It does stink that we don't have the ability to service them, certainly internally with SSDs, but because we have FireWire on the outside, we can certainly add high-speed storage. And with OS 15, I would call it a really significant leap for recognition. And I know Apple's got other, thoughts in terms of where they're going in the future, what they want people to pay for, and perhaps a more cloud based, but being able to connect a high-speed external drive, over SSDs and now install your applications, and effectively you can have all your data other than you keep the OS on the internal system for performance, but not being dependent on the internal drive anymore for your applications and being able to, these off documents, photos, etc. That does give, at least a really good option compared to spending, a big premium to have that storage internally.
So
Oh, wow.
take us back a little bit though. You say you started your company at 14 in Woodstock, Illinois. Is that correct?
Actually started in Marengo, technically started in a barn in Marengo for all practical purposes.
So
I
so
transitioned to Woodstock.
So what does that mean that you're tooling around with electronics? Were you a Radio Shack kid? Was there a Radio Shack in your local neighborhood? And then how do you go from that to being a world recognized brand?
Well, I guess I'll start with the current. I mean, very fortunate to have just really good people around me. It's really a team effort to say the least to do what we do every day. And it's also that part of the team is our customers. Our customers, the feedback that we get from those that use our solutions, and of course the support that we have from those using our products. We wouldn't be here without our customers. Of course, we're here because of our customers and glad to have the right solutions for those customers. And a big foundation of that was, we are our own customers. We had, the same needs and desires in terms of, what, we expected out of these systems. And that, kind of drove a lot of the development in the different products. There wasn't a Radio Shack in Woodstock, but I was pretty fortunate, really young. It just, and this changed probably the course of, all things, but, my parents for the raffle ticket, it was an Atari 400 XL. And that ended up, my dad used the tier aiding in his business, but my mom made me focus on, she made me learn how to code. I should say she made me learn how to code. It was not allowed for games. It was, you're going to learn how this stuff works. And kind of graduated into the Apple space around 1984, but ultimately was more doing coding and learning how, I guess mostly the inside work, how the software side worked. Probably I went down, I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere, had a modem, and it was, they say, yeah, that was the, war games and all the other, fun stuff. The movies that kind of inspired different exploration, I say. And then 1988 ended up with a system that was underpowered out of the box, and looked at the costs of upgrading, locally and having to take this thing in for, I mean, you had to drive 45 minutes to the closest Apple dealer that we had. Maybe it was about half an hour back then. They keep it for days, and then, you'd have to go back and pick it up. And taking this thing apart and looking at it, the real, connection that was made. Saw the part. I mean, we saw the video. You had a memory card in this machine. This was actually an Apple IIgs. It was before I had a Mac, and we had a computer shopper that was maybe 2 blocks from the school, the elementary school that I went to, and the part numbers, on the chips, so saw these in this giant computer shopper. I mean, you had this, it was this, and I'm sure you remember a computer shopper, that giant, I mean, you could probably knock somebody out with that magazine back in the day. And ultimately, I determined, hey, this is, I did it myself, ordered the chips. It was very easy for all practical purposes to take that machine apart. And they said, I mean, the Apple II was, unlike the Mac, was something that had slots, had, part numbers, parts you could pull out and put back in, and found, hey, this is not rocket science. You can do it in 5-10 minutes, in I say the comfort of your home. America Online was starting to fire up, and this is in '88, and started using America Online to offer this stuff to people. So, don't spend 400. Oh, well, one other, I think, big thing that helped. There had been and this is, when I say helped, I mean, this is not a great thing, but there had been it was actually a big one, but there had been an earthquake in Asia, and back then, I mean, it really, you had any kind of seismic disruption, it took a bit of time to reset the equipment. So the lithograph technology at the time it's still sensitive, but that would mean a disruption to production. Memory prices went through the roof. And one thing, again, a good old computer shopper I'd noticed, geez, in the Apple world, I mean, you went to an Apple dealer, they wanted $500 for 256 gigabytes. So, I still think Apple's prices are really high for memory, but, if you go back into the 80s, I mean, it was $500, was the going price for 256 kilobytes. Not a megabyte, not a gigabyte. We're talking just kilobytes, quarter of a meg, one
Oh,
thousandth of
God.
a gigabyte. We get the lowest machine today has 16 gigabytes of memory. I mean, it's crazy. But the reality was nobody dropped their prices when things stabilized and was able to come in and offer this stuff for under $100 for what, was $400, and the magazines was over $500 to get installed. Started explaining, wrote manuals, documentation on how you could do this. People say, well, if I break a chip, it's like, well, it's $500 if you go to the Apple store. It's under $100 to buy a whole other set. You're not going to, if you do break a chip. And started to support upgrades, and got into processors, got into SCSI drives, actually had the first 500 megabyte, half a gigabyte SCSI drive. This is about 1995. That was under $300, and it was bus powered. So we actually had the first bus powered hard drives way back in the early 90s, and just kept rolling along with that. I mean, it was processor. What's the next, frontier to make these machines faster? And we just went on and on. But one thing that we always did was make sure that this product was proper to Apple specification and Apple's requirements. And I think the big break that it would be in the 90s with processor upgrades and memory and such. I mean, that was a really good business. And when Apple went and opened up OS X and started testing, we were involved with that. Ultimately, really protested when Apple said no to all the beta testers. I mean, after a couple of years of beta testing, they took all these folks with really hopped up, at the time, beige G3s. And this is before, I think that actually it would have been the blue and white G3s as well. And some of these had G for upgrade. I'm getting maybe way too much in the weeds, but it was a lot of fun with what you could do with these machines. And then Jobs, I think it was 2001, they introduced the first G4 that shipped with OS X, and they said, "Yeah, hey, thanks for all the help testing, but you got to buy a new computer now to continue to use OS X." And we partnered with a gentleman out of Canada who had looked at the code and saw how he could support OS X continue to support it on the existing machines, and we released X post facto. And something else that happened at the same time, Apple, with OS X for the very first time, when they went release with it, enforced the cache ratings, the timings that the memory was supposed to have. And this was important because OS X was sensitive in terms of just how the processor interfaced with memory, and there were timing requirements. And a ton of our competitors' memory just disappeared out of systems. They never programmed it and they never tested it right. And Houston Chronicle ran a story that ended up being syndicated, basically saying we got our newspaper out today because the machines we'd upgraded with OWC were still running, and we had, we were down with these other machines. And hey, there's an importance. I mean, it was a really quick article that kind of said, you know who you buy from, and make sure you have support XYZ, and that was kind of off to the races. Our first FireWire drive, back in also 2001. We got into stores not initially because we really wanted to. I mean, we had done SCSI drives, for that point for a decade. We're still big in processor upgrades. There were lots of opportunities continuing with the ZIFs and then later the AGPs. But we got into FireWire drives because of creators like you who were buying at the time, the APS drives, even the C drives. And one week they'd work, and then the next week customers would buy the same model and they wouldn't work. And what we learned was getting into the guts of these things, it was flavor of the week. Flavor of the week being it'd be a different speed drive. It'd even be a different chipset for the FireWire interface. And maybe you all remember Oxford, but for FireWire, if you wanted to work with audio and video, it needed to be an Oxford chipset, and ideally with a 1700 RPM drive. So we made a push into that marketplace where we effectively engineered a solution with Oxford exclusively, with drives that we listed our chipset so people knew there was Oxford inside because that's what worked. And we put out real speeds. It wasn't this baloney of, 40 megabytes a second, which is what we got FireWire 400s, 40 megs a second. We put real world, benchmarks in all of our product to show what you could expect when using our drives. And that's something we still do to this day. But we listened to our customer, understood that the pain point, and this is with any of this. The problem was we couldn't deliver a consistent solution from the suppliers that we had. Our customers needed something, and we did have the technical ability to bring that solution to the market. So they can just keep going forward. FireWire goes on still do that well. But actually, it was pretty strong up until 2012, 2014 even. And then we, of course, rolled into the days of Thunderbolt. And throughout all this, you got memory, you got all these upgrades. And then Apple starts soldering things, which is, of course, first the memory and then the SSDs, which is now today we have everything is silicon on chip. And you can there are paths. We've considered for upgrading some of these systems on the SSD side, but it's unfortunately, there's the way Apple has things locked down. Apple bought actually an SSD controller company, Anavit, probably about 12 years ago, and we were looking at them as a successor for our own design from Sandforce, and it's like, oh, darn it, Apple now has them, and I do believe to this day that's how to say what's at the core of Apple's own SSD and T2 and whatnot. Really good company, really good. I can't speak for today, but certainly a decade ago, 12 years ago, their technology was very appealing, and Apple, of course, agreed. And here we are. Here we are today. So I've kind of jumped around, probably covered way too much, but that's in a
That's a
nutshell.
lot. No, it's, I mean, it just shows you how far we've come. Um, because like I said, my little SCSI drive, this 9 gig thing was right. How fast was this? I don't even know what this. I mean, I remember having what was it? Seagate made like the Cheetah and the
Hmm.
Barracuda. And those were like, if you had those as an editor, a freelancer, you were like, all right. They used to lock up, and my friend Evan Scheckman, you might know him. He's like Radical Media and Outpost Digital, but he reminds me a little of you in terms of like he really was dunked in this tech and went nuts with it, and like it's his whole life. But he told me to put these drives in the freezer when they wouldn't spin. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, man. Like, he's like,
Hmm.
trust me, put in the freezer, give it 3 hours, see what happens. 100% of the time they go. And it was like, that's to me, that's questionable technology. Um, but
Yeah, I
what's
can share a
that?
story here. I mean, I go, this is probably 94, 95. This was with one of the quantum, gosh, I forget what the drives were called at the time, but nonetheless, didn't have the best. I was not a good backup person, which is that was a good that experience changed me. I was very good at backups after that, but had the drive that had all the company data. I mean everything on it locked up. Did one of those things where it got stuck. But yes, put it in the freezer, gave it a little tap. When I took it out and powered it up, and was very thankful. How they say I was grateful and felt very blessed that that drive came back online, got all the data off, and was able to back it up and
Mhm.
ultimately continued to work for some time, but it was a different day. You don't do that with a drive today. That is for absolute certain.
Oh no, but it was like the same thing. It was like if it turns on, the next thing you do is get everything off the drive. And I've been doing that. I've been going through old drives here. I'm sure a lot of old Firewire 400s, 800s, and I'm shocked at how often like they just pop right up. I had maybe one like little portable drive that didn't want to do anything. It sounded kind of funky, but um, very, very reliable. And it's just I don't know. I mean, there's old Manhattan at workshop stuff, Jason, like really, really old class files and media and stuff like that. But I guess the implications, I mean, maybe turn this into a bit of a conceptual creative conversation. you know, I remember when things got fast. Like I come from like you, like zip drives. Oh my God, 100 megabytes. Holy shit. And it's super slow, but like you're cooking while you're waiting and do it, now everything is so fast. What's the expectation on the artist you know, to do the sort of that creative work? Is there a requirement that I feel like there's a requirement that also accelerate to the level of technology, and those things aren't necessarily, there's something to be said for fast transfers so that your work isn't impeded, but the work itself is it's different. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that because, um, I have friends who are like, yeah, now they're expecting me to do this stuff twice as fast.
Yeah, I can't speak to the demand side. I mean, I don't think that's realistic. I mean, we work at the speed we work at. I mean, the tools have gotten much, much better. I mean, there are things that certainly can help us along so we're not doing, call it the grunt work. I mean, there's the creative work and then there's the things that, perhaps AI is good for assisting on. But from a creative vision point of view, if nothing else, there is always that, that wait, go make a cup of coffee, come back up, maybe this time to actually put on a new pot kind of thing.
Mm,
I think there's less distraction and there's less worry. And when you know everything's been ingested, it's ready, maybe you've got it backed up, you've made a duplicate of it, you've got, hopefully you have more time to be creative and you've got less of those brain cells making decisions or, even having, thoughts or just wait and patience, while that technology, in the past was slowing you down. Now it's ready when you are. I got to obviously talk to I guess, talk to your boss, whoever's directing in terms of what the expectations are for
Mhm.
creativity. But you used to have to wait, you're right, a really long time. And now, again, I think I hope that that additional time gives, well, more time to sleep, more time for other things, more time so that, you can be a lot more refreshed and perhaps more creative and more effective with your
Mhm.
creative time when you're engaged on these things. You can't rush creativity. I mean, that's for sure. But it is nice that, you're not waiting. Do you have that moment of inspiration? I mean, the worst thing is when you want to do something and you're looking at that, that bar going across or that wheel, whatever else. So
Mhm.
I would call that a pretty big, I hope that's a big improvement for people today.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also the less of a requirement for a creative person to be a technician because sometimes they're not always both. And you used to be, you had to be you had to have a bit of a tool belt mentality
It's a
as an
requirement.
editor. Yeah. And so this frees up the other side of your brain to really focus on the work, which I think is also a big benefit.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
I'll wait until we're closing the interview. I just noticed that background and I'm like wondering, I have to ask a question about that. The dolphin? Is that what that is behind you?
It is. It's actually, how to say, a piece of art. My dad is loaned me. He moved, he didn't have room. And I do like, water's always good. Water's, it's calming, it's inspirational, it's nature got all those elements at work. So yes, is a dolphin behind me.
No, it's great. I just, I didn't know if it's a significant dolphin or just a decorative dolphin or a functional dolphin.
That would be I call that a decorative dolphin.
I
Mhm.
have a question back to it's still I guess it's water related. The jellyfish OWC jellyfish stuff that you guys have like besides the storage and everything else that you've been in that to me seems like a also kind of sprouting with the collaboration and all that kind of workflow stuff. Can you speak like seems like you've been evolving that and changing that as we especially now that I feel like so much remote collaboration, everything. I feel like that's just as important probably to your business and what you're seeing for your customers. I don't know if you could speak to that technology and how you guys have evolved with that and where it's at now.
Sure. I mean, everything, obviously works together. I mean, the docks, which have 10G on them, would let you connect to Jellyfish to high speed, direct attach storage. Nothing beats direct attach storage on your Mac in terms of the highest performance. And then you have the Jellyfish, which lets you actually work in multiple different ways. You can work on site with the Jellyfish. You can, upcoming right now, it's a little bit over 2,000 megs a second, 2 gigabytes a second, more or less. You can get over 210Gs. That's going to be doubling here in May off the existing systems. So for a single user or multiple users that want to share data, you can do it. You're going to be able to do it. You can already do it at amazing speed. But whether you're running off the Jellyfish or you're able to check out, I mean, bring it off the Jellyfish local and then from the other side of the world, and then load it back up into the Jellyfish, edit via proxy. I'm kind of jumping all over, but the Jellyfish, we go from, I mean, really an individual creator to small group, how to say, small creation group creator groups to Jellyfish, which, scales from a few people to, literally hundreds of people and powers entire, television stations with their pot. I mean, there's a BGTV in Norway, supports about 50 creators off a Jellyfish system that are constantly doing their podcasts or editing, and then all the way, how to say, between ingest and well, obviously finalized for the podcast and outward transmission. So it is a wide span, but ultimately Jellyfish starts to pick up where you may have a direct attached ecosystem or set up with your as a creator then Jellyfish opens that door to that collaboration, whether again you're going to continue to use direct attached or it's all being run off Jellyfish, and then it just grows and goes out from there. Even multiple Jellyfishes, things like the Nomad. That Nomad goes, how do I say, with production crews. One in particular, there's Jesus, I want to say it's the Lifetime. It's a Lifetime bike series, and it's fitness. I'm sorry, Lifetime Fitness and Miles to promote it, but they're shooting with cameras that are on helicopters, on cars, stationary, people on bikes, and all this footage comes in. They bring it into the Jellyfish. They also offload it into Thunderbays and Thunderblades. But within 48 hours, I mean, they turn it over from all these different video sources, effectively a TV-ready production that's put out for. They broadcast it online. I think it may be televised at a later point, but ultimately, it's a TV quality show that they turn over in 48 hours. And I mean, from the end of the end of the race to it's out for everybody to see. And it's, these kinds of solutions make that possible. And the price points, what you can do now. I mean, this is not, $1 million gear. Would have been $1 million type of solution, if you go back a decade. Now today, I mean, these things start, around $10,000, and will support all these creators and let you get that kind of work done, which is I would hope. I hope it's lucrative work, but the Jellyfish, I mean, picks up where you outgrow just being direct attached. It interfaces with the direct attached. I mean, it doesn't have to replace, or it becomes that freestanding central solution if you're in a network place where you can start running those multiple, whether it's a single 10G or bonding for 10 gigabit connections. And that's interesting as well. The Apple platform is very easy to go up to 40 gigabits with four 10Gs. It doesn't work quite the same if you try to do this with 25 gigabit connectors. You can't bond two of those and get to 50G today. Plus, just kind of nice with the 10G that we put out there. I'm going off into all these different tangents, but being driverless is plug and play, and there's not headaches as you go between different Mac OSs.
Tell us
like
a
Apple a
little.
lot.
Tell us a little bit about your R&D department and the evolution of it. You're talking incredible technology and the evolution of, from the 80s to 90s to now. How did it start out? Was it just you in the beginning, and then you grew to 2, 4, 8, and how many people do you have now in R&D?
It started with just me, and it started with, how'd I say, just primarily hardware. And it was, I hate to saying tinkering would be, I would not be exactly the right word, but over the course, I mean, things got more complicated and continue to bring in more engineering resources. I mean, kind of even engineering. In the beginning, it was, primarily ODM. And we had the right sauce, and we worked with those that could do the board layout and effectively put the chipsets we wanted together. I mean, today there's a zillion places to throw a bunch of chipsets together, and there always have been, quite honestly. The difference, though, is doing so with purpose and understanding the customer needs so that, what you're connecting, how it's being connected, what's required to support it, especially on the Apple platform, is in place. I mean, it doesn't matter what port something has rather, if it doesn't actually work or if all the ports don't work the way you need it. We brought out, I'm kind of jumping around, but we brought out a Thunderbolt dock, our first Thunderbolt dock in 2014. And, it was a 14 port, I'm sorry, it was a 12 port dock at the time. And it was the first dock that actually allowed for multi-camera input. This was USB cameras for podcasts and whatnot, because we put the right bandwidth to the ports. There's a bunch of stuff out there that had a bunch of ports, but it wasn't so much even cutting corners. It's just you could have, multiple ports off a single chipset. We looked at that and said, there's not enough bandwidth to support if you're using all those ports. You're going to have this fast interface. You've got to be able to use what you connect to it. And when our product was reviewed, I mean, we did it out of common sense. And, especially online, it got picked up broadly because the guys that reviewed it also needed this kind of technology because this let them do what they couldn't do before. So from an R&D point of view, we continue to grow our hardware team and we've worked with SoftRAID for at that point, since about 2005, 2006. We brought that in-house in 2014, really seeing, I mean, it was kind of a pivotal point whether we focus on hardware RAID or software RAID. I guess there has been just a perception to overcome, and there's been some really horrible software RAID applications over the years. One tried to use a GPU and really messed up folks who are doing video editing and such. SoftRAID, which actually at one point even shipped with Apple Macs back in the how to say early 2000s, has been done really intelligently from day one. It provides exceptional control and of your drives for multiple, so we can do multiple volumes with different RAID levels. So it's not just one giant RAID. Let's use segmented drives so that you can actually have a fast part and a slower part. The outer part of a drive is faster. When you set up a SoftRAID volume, it'll actually allocate to the outer tracks. So you always have that fast scratch area. And then the inner tracks you can use for your offload, your archive and such, because as you get closer to the in the middle of the drive, it gets a lot slower. It can be half the speed as you approach those inner tracks. SoftRAID also is a very light hit to the processor. It's never been a heavy load that's actually impacted workflow. So we looked at hardware where hardware RAID was, not just the cost, but the limitations. And a lot of hardware RAIDs, and I can go really into the weeds here, but they post these crazy numbers, and that's when they're running off of a memory cache. As soon as that memory cache is gone, which is typically pretty small. I mean, it's megabytes, or well, I guess now today it would be 32 or 64 gigabytes. A lot of them have. As soon as you get past that, the performance nosedives. SoftRAID stays consistent, limitedly to the drives themselves, which is what you want for how to say an ongoing edit project or ongoing ingest. I mean, it's not just these flash in the pan numbers; they're real performance that we deliver. SoftRAID also doesn't require any drivers with Mac OS. It's plug and play and go. And I can say that we've worked certainly since the M1, the Apple Silicon came out. We've done a lot of reporting and a lot of I would say positive constructive feedback with Apple that's really resulted in an amazing. SoftRAID's always been fantastic, but with each new OS over the Apple OS over the last few years, honestly, between what we do on our side and we see implemented on the Apple side, it's just gotten better and better. And from a performance point of view, it's in the real world, where not just for trying to run a fancy benchmark where it really matters, SoftRAID is pretty unbeatable. Plus, we tell you that's back in the day, drives failed and it really sucked because there really wasn't a lot of warning. Smart, which is a collaboration between the major hard drive manufacturers. By the time it tells you a drive is failing, you're in big trouble. I mean, you may already have corruption. You may already have a system that's been crashing. You may already have a drive that's at that point not even functional. SoftRAID looks at the drive, has a good history of its performance and what its behavior is, and tends to give you, if not weeks, months of advance notice when it's time to replace. And it's all these different things. I mean, I could talk about SoftRAID for hours and hours and hours, but 2014 we got heavy into, and we really shifted to understanding the hardware is very important, and building quality hardware, building it the right way is a huge piece of the equation. But the software that supports it, the software that interfaces with it, you've got to have the software piece, and whether it's our docs or our source solutions, it's not just hardware. There's a lot of software that goes into the firmware that's on those solutions, and then the software that runs on the how to say the Macs itself to give you more capabilities and more, not just get more from this technology. So we don't just build things and say go plug it in and have fun. I mean, we build things and we try to provide all sorts of avenues to get the maximum benefit from these investments, and we want these investments to last and keep going. Your Mac lasts a long time. We want to make sure that the solutions that we provide go to the distance as well. We don't do planned obsolescence, so that's the only other area we probably fight a little with Apple. But
There's one of you out there. That's great. That's it seems like that's the you're the exception, not the rule. But it's interesting because I was thinking about this in terms of like watching a good movie. When you start watching it, like you realize you're in good hands. Like there's so much going on behind the scenes and so much skill. Like you have to think about what you're doing with your products because you guys are. You know what I mean? Like you're not all state, right? But we're in good hands. Like it's just something it's good to know that you guys have that level of R&D and care going into the product, because it takes some of that concern away.
I don't think, people knew just how much test. I mean, there is a lot that goes into making sure everything is perfect. And some of the stuff we do ends up being for the benefit, for lack of anything else, I mean, for the benefit of our competition. But I guess I'll say two things. I mean, when it comes to data, I mean, we don't want to see anybody lose data anytime, anywhere, if, we can help prevent that. And the other piece would be even like camera cards. I mean, a decade ago, I mean, stuff has gotten a lot more complex as things have gotten faster, and as we have these different processors, with Apple. I mean, as that hardware and that technologies evolve, things don't work. I mean, back in the day, like I said, you have your drive got stuck, put it in the freezer, give it a tap, and amazing, it came back. Today, it's you don't just plug things in and away they go. I mean, SCSI drive was a drive and effectively a power supply, and then a cable that went to it. Had to terminate the bus, but it was, by today's standards, it was really simple technology to interface with. And the amount of testing, even on SSDs, we want to talk about how SSDs work, but on a camera card, we have pretty much every camera that's in the market today. If we say it's compatible, it's not just because it should be compatible, it's because we actually have these cameras and they go through, I mean, unbelievable numbers, I mean, of different test iterations in every mode, in every capture state, from beginning to end on a camera card to make sure. We've uncovered a lot of, how to say, a lot of bugs out there with some of the base stuff. I mean, we ultimately make a lot of changes and a lot of enhancement would be the right word to what becomes the final release firmware. When we looked at camera cards a decade ago, and we didn't get into it at that point, we got into camera cards about, yes, it's now been about 4 years that we started down the camera card path, but it was easy. I mean, we did SSDs. You put flash on a controller into a really small package, and it pretty much worked everywhere for the most part, and that was because of the speed of cameras. Today, you're doing 4K, 8K. I mean, there's cameras doing 16K. I forget what the new Black Magic does. It's a whole different world, and the amount of testing that has to go in so that you don't lose a frame, that you don't have a card fail, that you don't have a surprise and lose a moment you're never going to get back. Is pretty intense. And then on the flip side, it's been really exciting bringing out the first Gen 4 cards, which, in addition to providing really good speeds on to keep up with the cameras on the ingest side, that's actually the easy part in terms of having. Well, it is and it isn't. From a performance point, it's the easy part. From the compatibility and the firmware side, it's really complicated. But being able to get people cards that can reliably capture and all the different cameras and all the different modes, that's step one. Step two is if you captured a terabyte of data, you want to be able to get that off. And with the Gen 4 now being able to pull that off at 4,000, close to 4,000 megs a second, and then having drives that can ingest at that speed, it saves a ton of time. And the last thing I go into planned obsolescence, and there's few that I think there's really only one other brand that I would say approaches what we do with Energize. But being able to sanitize a card after you've done your shot, after you've done your shooting, after you've ingested your data off and you're comfortable to get your backups, that restores the card to full factory original performance. And you don't have to do it every time, but there's no trim interface on cameras or via USB, for these cards. And these are effectively SSDs, in a really small package. And over time, that the cache in these cards, which enables the high performance that cameras need today, it becomes, I mean, it is kind of a technical term, but that cache becomes dirty. And that's when you end up with, whether you're doing the high speed stills or you're doing video capture, that's when you start to see either frames slow down or your frame capture start to have problems in video. Sanitize, which is a clean sweep of the card, is a reset, clears all the data. So if it's a rental shop or it's, if you rented a camera and you return it, or you're sharing it in a school and don't necessarily want, your photos or video to be shared with somebody else, that's all taken care of. But it brings it back to 100%, maximum performance. Whereas when you just erase a card, do the quick erase, you still have, you're continuing to have, I guess you could say, this is not a technical way of putting it, but a buildup of dirt in that cache, which eventually will bite you. And you look at our competition, they don't offer, there's not health checks, which we provide, so you can see that the card is healthy. There's not a sanitized. You can technically do a low-level format that wastes write cycles and can take a couple hours or longer, depending upon the card. But there's so many cards, and this is kind of one of the reasons we got into the space. Number one, we have really good expertise in solid state technology, and number two, saw this waste happening where somebody would they see the camera card start to have a few problems and assume that the card was failing. reality is it just hadn't been sanitized, hadn't been cleaned, and the manufacturers, the largest manufacturers, don't give you a way to maintain the card. And they're happy to have you put that card up on the shelf and buy another one.
Mhm.
We've always wanted to see people get the absolute maximum out of the technology that we provide that they've already invested in, whether it's our technology or someone else's. And we hope that we grow not because we end up with people buying something that they have to replace because of, well, I would say early retirement, but that they share how well our products are working, and we grow and have additional customers because we're providing a solution that's cost effective. And it's used the word sustainable. Sustainable is the wrong word, but it's economically sustainable. I mean, it's better for your budget. It's better for all sorts of things. I mean, and growing up where I grew up, it was waste not, want not. And that's, certainly something that we put into technology, build it so it can last. And if we know that we can extend it, it's not even extending it. I mean, it'd be kind of like, would you replace the windshield on your car because it got dirty? No, you clean it. And that's kind of, that's what we're
That's
doing with these.
it's a good way of putting it. So we're just going to wrap things up. I got this message that there's an online group, the LAPPG has a March online meeting. You want to tell us any events that are going on, any trade shows that you're going to be at anytime soon?
Sure. WPPI, I think, is just about to kick off. We'll be there. We're, of course, at NAB and another, geez, I think that's just 3 weeks away, 4 weeks away. So those will be the next two. And we're going to be doing all sorts of little events around the country. I say little events, I mean, they're big events for where they are. And, it's the big shows. I mean, we're trying to be more involved with the groups at these shows, less about being, in a booth, because, we want to, interfacing with you is, where we learn and where we, like I say, get the best feedback, so that not necessarily we may not always provide the product that somebody asked for, but our goal is to provide a solution to the problem that's being presented. Sometimes it's exactly what somebody's asking for. Other times, like, that's not going to quite be the solution, but we know what will be. And it's great to be. I think we've got a pretty good pipeline, pretty good roadmap for the next 2-3 years with what we're seeing coming down. And again, it's all about that software and hardware. But all these shows, and I think there's probably 20-30 events around the country that OWC will be at this year. The best part is talking to you.
Thank you, Josh. Takeaways.
Yes. I mean, so obvious how passionate you are about what you do. That's the immediate takeaway. Wow. Like, it seems like you really found your calling, and it's your career, and you wound the two things up at the same time, because you don't hear that many people talk about what they do as excitedly, enthusiastically, in depth. You really know everything about what's going on. It's really a pleasure to hear about. Again, I come from a world where, like, you had to sort of, roll your sleeves up and do, like, I know. You've forgotten more about the technology than I'll ever know. Let me just put it that way. But I find it very interesting, and I love the dedication you have to advancing this and to doing it in a way that's not just about buy this again in 2 years because it's going to break. I love that. So yeah, that's it's like an energy boost. This conversation was like drinking a Red Bull. Thank you.
Jason,
it'd be great if people did recognize and realize just how much, how much you had to know a decade ago to use this technology. It's just the fact you can just plug this stuff in and go, and it's just start clicking your mouse and engage the brain on the create. It's a real luxury that, is, by the better term, is almost kind of taken for granted. It's not as appreciated as it probably is by someone like yourself that just, seen this evolution over the decades.
Jason, what's going on at the Manhattan Edit Workshop?
Well, we got more classes coming up, and we should be announcing a bunch of events probably very shortly. So I would go to sitesoundstory.com to check that out as it comes out.
Sounds great. On behalf of Manhattan Edit Workshop, Larry O'Connor, thank you so much for joining us today. Josh Apter, Jason Banke, it's a pleasure working with you, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.